Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Coming up on the Payoff. You know, when you do a job like this, if you want to call it a job, it requires due diligence. And one time I was doing that due diligence, and I came across this podcast. I was researching on a guest we had a little while back, Vance Johnson. And the episode when Vance Johnson appeared on That Sober Guy podcast was something that I found. And I listened to it, and I went down a rabbit hole on this guy's work. His name is Shane Raymer. He's got just this authentic charisma that's contagious, and it's something that you want to catch, whether you're in recovery or not. So I want you to dig in and enjoy this. We talk about everything, about him being a kid from the Bay Area, growing up, cheering for the Bash Brothers, Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco, to, you know, he's a kid with a light in his eye, right? He's excited. He has goals. And then he's working at a job where he starts to cry in the middle of his day because he feels hopeless. And he's drinking, you know, Red Bull and vodka on the way to work, and so on and so forth, and worse than that. And his message is unbelievable. The guy, I think, is 8 or 9 years sober, but you talk to him today, it's like he's somebody with a good 40, 50 years of recovery. 8 years is a long time, man, but this guy talks like an old timer. All right, enough out of me. Let's get to Shane. Actually, let's get to Kevin Souza first.
Meet.
Shane.
Hey, what's up, man? How are you?
What's up, dude? How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. It's Friday, man. I'm ready to go. You know, ready to do the thing.
And you're an early morning guy.
I am. I've been getting to bed a little later though, man. I'm managing my son's little league team right now, so we've had these late games at like 7. So we didn't get in until almost 9 last night, and then ate some pizza and hung out for a little bit. So. I've been waking up, sleeping in a little bit, but, you know, we're good.
How's the team? How's the team? How are we doing?
They're 7 and 8, so it's like herding cats, but they're doing much better. Yeah,
I like that. It's like a goat rodeo, right?
A goat rodeo is a great way to put it. Oh yeah,
yeah.
It's fun. It's fun. I mean, they're getting better though, so it's fun. My son's he's having a blast, man. Like I told him, I said, hey, it's not so much. Obviously, we're learning baseball. But we're coming together as a team. We're hanging out. We're having fun. You know, we're making new friends and stuff. So it's been a good time.
Dude, think about, and, you know, we'll get right into it. First of all, how it's going to go.
Yeah.
It's me and you and Mike, the producer. Mike, say what's up.
Hey, how's it going?
Mike, what's up, man? Good to meet you.
Yeah, Shane, by the way, how do you say your last name?
Raymer.
Okay. Raymer. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know why they took the Y out of there, but yeah, so for some reason they did.
Same with me. I'm Sousa, but you're supposed to pronounce it Souza, and somebody at some point in time took the Z out and threw an S in there, and here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
So I'll give an intro as to who you are, you know, That Sober Guy podcast, and a little bit about just kind of what you're doing and how I found you, you know, how you inspired me and how we got here, and then we'll just go right into this convo.
Awesome. That sounds fun, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So are you still in Northern California?
I am. Yeah. We just came back up here in December. We went down to Huntington Beach for about almost a year last year, and then we came back up here at the end of the year.
So you're married and you got two kids?
Yep. Married, 2 kids. A cat and a dog.
Yeah, the animals start to multiply. I got a couple. I've inherited a couple cats. I had a dog. I had another dog. It's kind of the more the merrier, I guess.
Well, it's always too. It's like my daughter and my wife like, well, we want a cat, and I'm like, no, we're not getting a cat. Sure as shit. Here comes the cat rolling in. Like a couple weeks later. So,
Dude, the cat's the coolest one for me. I was always like,
Agreed.
yeah, and we talk about the vulnerability, right? And we'll get to that, but it's like, you want to be this tough guy that hangs out with a pit bull, and at the end of the day, I'm huddled up with the cat, being like, man, this is my spirit animal.
Dude, I love it, and yeah, the cat. Our cat's a Siamese cat, and so she's super smart and she's kind of funny. But you just reminded me of we have a little white fluffy dog. You reminded me of an old podcast I did called "Does It Make You a Pussy to Walk Down the Street with a Little White Dog?" you reminded me of the pit bull. You want to have the big pit bull and shit. It's like, no, I don't do that. The white dog is just fine.
Well, that's the thing, dude. Right? At what point are you going to be comfortable in your own skin?
Yeah. I love it. That's so good. Yep. That's it. That's what it's about.
And you're comfortable in your own skin, but your journey started. You grew up in Northern California. Is that right?
I did. Yeah. Solano County, Napa, Vallejo, Fairfield, and we're in Vacaville now.
Okay, so close to like San Fran around there.
Yeah, it's considered like East Bay Area. It's probably about as far east as you'll get before it starts to not be the Bay Area.
Okay. And you say growing up in your household, you said it was madness sometimes. Like, dive into that with me.
Man, yeah. It was, I would describe it as controlled chaos almost. My dad had control of everything. But what's funny is at the same time, I don't think he could control himself. So there was a lot of unpredictability, I think is a good way to put it. So what it did for me as a kid is I was just always on edge, man. Like, cause you never knew when you came home if it was going to be a good vibe, if, my dad was going to be listening to music and he was always having some drinks, but there could be that vibe that like music and him and mom were getting along good and like everything was cool. Or it could be the complete opposite. You come home from school and it's just chaos, and like he's in a bad mood and like you can't do anything right, so the unpredictability, I think it made me become a runner at a really young age where I learned to run from things. I didn't know how to deal with emotion, to deal with feeling. And that's something I still struggle with today. I continue to do work and practice on that, on the ability to be able to feel my feelings. And that's probably why I drank, and did other substances to kind of suppress a lot of that stuff.
Dude, I grew up in a similar environment. My dad was a functional alcoholic, but the moods were like really, as a kid, it's like, how the fuck are you keeping track of that? And it's like, and I see it in my own life today as I still get uncomfortable by people that are like, that seem like they're not in a good place. Like I noticed that it hit something inside me. And now at least I'm getting better in recovery, but for a while I would just dump alcohol in those feelings. So I was like, I'm tough. Like, I don't care. What do I care how you're acting?
Yep. Yeah. It's funny how you can pick up on that too. Like you said, you can feel that energy. That vibe. Like when I talk to somebody who maybe I just meet, I can tell that they have that. I can tell that they are actively drinking and even in the laugh, there's a certain laugh that comes out.
Yeah.
And this isn't like from a judgmental point of view at all, man. I try to give everyone respect and try to be there, obviously, to help people and stuff, but you can pick up that vibe. You know what I mean? And it sounds like just from what you're saying in your childhood too, you can pick that up too. A lot of us can. Yeah,
it's a learned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, you start to, you're kind of similar, like you big into sports, and they kind of had like the just say no mentality, right? That for me, that was, I grew up in that, I think I'm a little older than you, but it was like, drugs are bad, like Dare would come to school and it was, you just knew, I was a product of the 80s pretty much going through my like grade school years. And, cocaine, I thought it was like this horrible, just like the worst thing in the world. And all of a sudden it flips so quickly. How did it? When did you start to? When did you start to go from the kid who was an athlete who had like no drugs, and then all of a sudden you're smoking pot, you're drinking?
Yeah, it's funny. I do remember that Just Say No, and Dare. Remember Dare?
Mm-hmm.
I actually think they still do that today. That program, and you reminded me of the commercial too. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs.
Yeah.
And they crack the egg in the frying pan.
Yeah,
right? And so it's funny, man. I haven't thought about those campaigns, but at that time, and in a long time, but as a kid, I totally had that mentality, and I also, I didn't want to go down the same path as my father was going down, and I had to do a lot of work in that, man. I love my dad, but I gotta kind of love him from a distance and pray for him and understand that he's on his own path, just like we all are. But that was my big thing at the time. I wasn't going to go down that same path. I wasn't going to drink. I wasn't going to smoke. I had some buddies in the neighborhood, and we all kind of made this pact that like we weren't going to do that. I played baseball, since I can even remember. And athlete, sports, and I don't know.
Are you a Giants fan? A Giants fan or an A's fan?
I'm an A's fan. I like the Bay Area. I like the Bay Area sports. I'm always down for any Bay Area sports. But I've always kind of stuck tight with Oakland.
Yeah, so you grew up like an A's fan, like McGuire, Canseco, those guys.
Oh yeah, the basketball. But I loved Will Clark and Robbie Thompson. I mean, I loved that whole squad of like that Giants era. I went to a lot of games at Candlestick back in the day. Definitely. But I stick with the A's, although it's tough to be an A's fan right now.
But you're loyal. I like that. And dude, I got a Bash Brothers T-shirt just because I think it's cool.
Oh no way!
Yeah. It's because people don't understand this. Well, people do. Whatever. I don't want to say that, but like when we were growing up, baseball was really cool. Like so, being a baseball player was cool. Like the A's were cool. Not to say that guys who play baseball today aren't real cool or whatever, but like kids were watching, it was kind of like the NBA is today almost. And that's changed. But you grow up playing baseball.
It totally has. And there was definitely a different vibe on baseball, back when we were growing up. I just feel like it's hard to watch a specific team because it's become so much of a business.
Uh-huh.
And I understand there's a lot of money involved in there's a lot of different components to it. But like right now I'm looking at, my buddy found at a swap meet, an old Battle of the Bay chevron poster where it's the A's and Giants tugging on the pennant over the Bay Bridge.
Wow.
Yeah, man. So I have it up in my garage just like as a little little keepsake just to remember that moment, man. It was pretty damn cool. That was the earthquake year too.
Yeah.
But anyways, man. Yeah. So it's just
89. I was trying to think of that was 89, right?
89.
Yeah.
Yep. 89.
Okay.
1989.
All right. So back to you. So you're playing baseball. And what happens? How do we drift into like starting to use?
Yeah. So I can remember the first time that I actually drank, or at least one of the first times. It's a little foggy, but there was one in particular. And I was at a buddy's house, and his older cousin was there, and we were just kind of hanging out. And he had a full bottle of Bacardi Limon. And I remember drinking almost the whole bottle of it. And I remember I got so sick. And at the same time, and I know there's a lot of other dudes out there who've experienced this because I've heard similar stories. And we got sick. Like I got sick, but at the same time, I got so warm, and it made all those feelings of like unpredictable chaos, anger, frustration, fear, sadness. It made everything go away. And I was actually kind of happy in the moment because I was goofy. And then, before you know it, I'm throwing up and I feel like shit the next day. But that moment of peace, I guess, I don't even want to say peace because peace would mean something different. It was actually more of a numbness.
Uh-huh.
I was numb, and it just felt good. And I think from that moment between those feelings of being able to run and just escape my feelings, and then also a combination of just being a young, confused kid, who was trying. You submit to some peer pressure. I think you want to be cool. Like I wanted to be cool and fit in, and there was people starting to smoke weed and drink, and so
yeah. Unfortunately for me, I felt like I kind of like I had an all access pass to like the popular kids. I mean, like I hate to say that now. It even irks me to say it now. But once I started to drink, I mean, same as you. I had this one night where I drank this bottle of J&B with a couple dudes, and I was sick, and they drew all over me, and but I was like a part of a whole nother crowd of guys that I ran with for a very long time, and there was something like you said. There's a confused little kid aspect to it as well.
Oh yeah, that's so much confusion, and like I don't know if some of the dudes that you hung out with were like fellow athletes and buddies that you played sports with, but that's like our baseball team. Like I played high school baseball, and that's we played ball, and then we all hung out and partied after the game. Some of my buddy Rick, we'd go to his spot afterwards, and he had kind of the party spot, so we'd all hang out on the weekends, or we'd go to the park and get a couple cases of Natty Ice and just hang out and drink beers. And, it was like, it was kind of like, I hate to say it, but man, it was kind of fun.
Sure.
At that time. It was still fun. I wasn't getting in trouble. I wasn't addicted to it, but it was definitely the start of going down this path that, that took me in the wrong direction in my life that I wanted to go. Describe
some of your progression to me in addiction. Like, how did it go?
Yeah, I think, I always smoked a lot of pot, that was always there, but, alcohol was always the foundation. There seemed to be always alcohol around, which when I would drink alcohol started leading as I got into my 20s, some other drugs like cocaine. And I tried some other drug. A lot of, pills were starting to get big around that time too.
Yeah.
So I would kind of do what was around. I had a lot of different friends in different groups, and people had different access to different things. And my 20s were just like, and same with my wife Jess and I. We've known each other since the 6th grade.
No way.
I had a crush on her. Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. She's a cool chick, and like we've been friends for a long time. We didn't end up getting together till I was about 20 or 21, and but in our 20s, I mean, it was just one big party. We worked. I'm also like an amateur musician. I love playing music.
Yeah, I saw that about you.
And
yeah.
So I was in a lot of bands, and I kind of had this dream to be in the music business, and but I had no concept of like that's why I just said music business. I had no concept of the business part of it. It was just like, hey, you're supposed to like get hammered and like party and like make music, and that's so. And then just magically, there's like this record fairy that comes down and just like grants you this record deal, and you're rich and famous. It was just like totally this skewed amateur, like dreamy kind of thing.
Dude, when I was in like the throes of my addiction early on, and I was doing a lot of coke, and I had a job. I had a pretty good job, but I was obsessed with starting a record label. Like, ask me what but hold on now. Ask me what I knew about starting a record label. I didn't know shit. I just knew you got to go like guys in the record labels were the guys in the pictures, with the rappers. I was out of my mind. But like I can relate to that. Whatever it is, whether it's people working in the restaurant industry or being in the movies or being whatever. Like a lot of times as an alcoholic, your dreams kind of rotate around access to that shit,
Totally. You know what I've realized, Pete, like especially in the last like maybe year, 2 years, is that a lot of that came and comes from this deep desire to feel wanted and needed and seen. Because as a kid, my self-worth and confidence was so low. Just because of fear and just because of just everything that, was going on, that there was a level of insecurity that was really, really deep. And so I think that I thought I had something to prove, and I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with
Yeah.
you know, us as men having something to prove and being driven and wanting to work hard and go get it. Like I absolutely support that, but it has to come from a healthy place.
Yeah. Like, what's your
And like
motivation?
when I was, yeah, what's your motivation behind it? And my motivation behind it at that time was just like, I didn't really know. I just knew that I needed to be like seen, you know, I wanted to be heard, you know? And so that kind of led me down. Was big into the punk rock music scene and like hardcore, like different underground hardcore, like metal and punk shows. And the one thing that was amazing though at that time, even though as the drinking and drugs and stuff started to progress, like I found this place called a mosh pit where I could get out all that animosity. And so like my teams and we have some friends of ours from Vacaville here. They're a band called Papa Roach. And
oh
and
yeah,
we grew up with
really?
these
So those
guys.
are your guys?
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, my buddy Dave. He's a great dude. He's just.
And they were big.
here.
They kind of hit when we were growing up, like at least like, you know, on the pop culture level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. And so I think that we saw them here, you know, as friends and stuff, like, oh man, like, dude, they made it, like, and they're still actually going strong, which is pretty damn amazing.
Yeah,
for,
that is cool.
You know, the music business. But so yeah, I mean, those times, you know, I remember my buddy Ray took me to my first, it was Papa Roach, and it was a buddy of mine, Chris, and Absolute. And it was this little hole in the wall show in Vacaville. It was super small. And they were just there's this little small circle mosh pit going on. And I kind of didn't know what to do. I think we were like 14, 15 maybe. And my buddy Ray kind of leans in and he goes, hey, you got to just let go. You got to just let go. And so I was like, what? And in that moment, I kind of let go, and I started like moshing for the first time, and boom, it was just like, I just let go of all that shit. And so I had a lot of good times in that. But as that went on, man, through my 20s, and I was working construction, and, you know, I was commuting and work hard, party hard.
What's that scene? What's that scene like that punk rock scene, like drug wise?
Oh man. Well, back then, I think, you know, alcohol was always a foundation, because a lot of the time shows were at bars, you know, and different venues like that. And even in the other bigger venues, you know, they sold alcohol. But back then, yeah, it was coke, weed, pills. There was a lot. See, I never got into heroin, but I think there was a lot of dudes like Nick Traina was someone who I really looked up to back in the day. He was the lead singer for a band called Link 80. And Danielle Steele, the writer, is actually his mom.
Wow.
And unfortunately, yeah, it's a really cool story. She wrote a great book called His Bright Light.
Yeah.
And it talks about Nick and Nick's story as a kid and growing up and starting the band and like touring the world. And then he was a manic depressant, and he also got hooked on heroin. And so, you know, he ended up losing his life to that, you know, at a super young age. I think he was in his early 20s, and just a lot of potential. And so we hear a lot of those stories like that, especially in the music business, in particular. But yeah, I mean, the scene it was
hardcore,
man. It was hardcore, and it depended on, you know, where you went. But I will say this though too. Contrary to that, I got a good buddy of mine, Justin Coot, who was in a band called Execution Style. And the straight edge scene of hardcore kids, I wish I would have been a part of that at that time.
Yeah, no, straight edge, define straight edge.
Yeah, it was just a huge so the straight edge kids, man, they didn't believe in drugs, alcohol, sex. A lot of them didn't have premarital sex. There were strict guidelines if you were a straight edge kid, and you stuck to it. It was a solid brotherhood. There's still a huge straight edge movement out there today. I'm not really hip to it as far as, you know, because this was years ago for me in that scene. But I know that movement is huge. And all those kids that I met back in the day, man, they were always about the brotherhood, about the like a tight community. And we don't mess with that kind of stuff. So I wish if I could go back, I'd probably go down that route. But, you know, hey, you know, it's, you know, we do things for a reason, I guess. I wouldn't be where I am today, I guess. Like,
no, and you're helping a shitload of people. And you were mentioning, so a guy, Justin, came out of that scene, out of the straight edge scene?
Yeah. Yeah. My buddy Justin, he was actually on the podcast like early on when I first started it, probably the first 20 or 30 episodes. And yeah, he just chose when we were probably 15, 16, him and I and a couple other buddies, we would sit up in his room and we'd play drums and like sing and like drink 40s and stuff. And then I don't know, it must have been around 17 or 18 for him. He just decided like, hey, I'm not doing this anymore. And he went straight edge. And he went down a different path. Still stayed in the music scene, but just was more encompassed in that scene versus like the party scene.
So for you, when you're dealing with like you're in your 20s, you're working construction, is there zero direction? Like, are you kind of working and living to get to do drugs and party?
Yeah. I remember one day being in San Francisco. And so I'm a taper, a drywall finisher by trade, right? Like back in the day, that's what I did during this time in my 20s. And so I was commuting up early in the morning, driving out to the city, about an hour drive without traffic. And I remember being in this, we were working in a high-rise condo building. And so it's like cookie cutter. Each condo or apartment is pretty much exactly the same. And you got multiple floors. And you're going down a floor, and we called it sanding lids. And so you got your sanding pole, and you're sitting there, and you got a dust mask on if you want to wear it, but it's hot, sweaty. So a lot of the time I had to take mine off because it's hard to even breathe. But you're up there, and you're sanding ceilings all day for 8 hours a day, for the most part.
Wow.
And I remember sitting there and literally crying. Like, I'm not talking about bawling out, but just like getting choked up and crying, hungover, and going, God, I know there's something more for my life. Like, I know there is, but I felt so stuck, because I was actually making kind of decent money at that time. I was probably halfway through my apprenticeship. And I think you put it well. I was kind of living to party because we were drinking on every night, after work, on the way home from work, and then the weekends were, a party, and then it was like, boom, do it all over again.
Yeah, I mean, this is addiction. So these are all my questions 100%. Are based on experience, right? I mean, like there was a point in time in my life where I took a job that I really didn't even want, but my parents were like, hey, you need to get a job. It was right out of college, and I don't even know. I remember I was like working as an assistant for some dude, and I spelled my name wrong, my own name on a fax like cover letter, and the guy was like, "Dude, you spelled your name wrong." And so like, and I was just every night. I mean, it was just every night I would go out and party, and it's funny because that's what this stuff does. It robs us. I had goals, dude. I mean, I had things I wanted to do. I had things that turned the light on when I was younger, and alcohol and drugs, it just turned that light off. And I thought I thought the most important thing in my life, there's no question about it, was alcohol and drugs. And my every move for me was predicated on that stuff, and it sounds like it was for you too. Now you're doing the drywall and like, you're still like in the music scene. What starts to happen when we start to like bottom out? I mean, you mentioned that moment, that emotional moment you just shared.
Yeah. So I ended up getting out of construction I journeyed out, and then I saw what it was doing to the older guys that I was working with. They were just miserable. They hated their lives. It seemed like most of them were alcoholics. And so I got laid off because work was just really slow at this time. And so I was kind of bouncing around between companies, and I just made the decision that I was going to get out of that. And I almost went back to school actually at the time. And then I ended up getting a temporary job with the big energy company out in California that supplies energy and gas to the state. And it was just a temp in the mail room. And so as it progresses, I'll kind of like, and I can remember this so clear. It's like the middle of summer. I think it's like August. It's 102 degrees, at least, it's just one of those hot ass days, like 100 plus. Right. I'm driving to work. Like I got a little single cab stick shift Chevy S10, like no AC. I'm sweating, and I stopped by the liquor store, like the same one, and I grabbed my usual. This is on the way to work.
On the way,
vodka,
okay.
Red Bull.
Yeah.
So I'm racing down Interstate 80, towards Sacramento. I pour a strong, mix. I've always put it in like a McDonald's cup, with a straw.
Yeah.
And then I drink it as fast as I can before I get to work. Right now, this is just another Wednesday at like 1 in the afternoon. I'm working a swing shift in the mailroom as a machine operator, like on what started as a temp job. But this same situation had literally been happening like every day for months, as this had kind of gone on.
And those are doors we walk through, right? It's like now you're drinking before work, like before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's like now, like you said, it's just another day. So go ahead. So you whack this shit down.
Yeah, and that was to your point, the progression of it, because I wasn't really doing that when I was doing drywall. I was hung over a lot, and I think we did some coke here and there to try to get the day moving.
Yeah.
But it was never it was always after work at least. But yeah, and like I said, I swore up and down I was never going to do this. Like as a kid, like my home life growing up and stuff, I'd watched it, seen what it did to my dad, and so here I am. I'm 32 years old around that time, I think. Yeah, my daughter's like 2.5, 3. I'm married at the time. I'm miserable in this job. I'm miserable in my skin. I'm scared to be a father. My relationship with my wife was like really on the rocks at that time. It's really going in the wrong direction because we don't know how to communicate.
Yeah. My
self-worth, my confidence, like all-time low. I'm feeling pretty lost. Pretty frustrated, like I have no purpose. It's like, what is this all for? But the one thing that makes all the feelings go away is alcohol, right? And at the same time, I know in my gut that God has something more for my life. And I knew I could be a better father. I wanted to be a better husband, father. I just wanted to be a better man, like a human being. There was something more, but I couldn't stop drinking. Like I literally could not stop drinking. Like every day was the same thing. It was like, I'm going to quit today. And then boom, I'd stop at that same liquor store. So one night after work, I'm up drinking. This is, and I smoked weed at the time too. So I'm smoking like a fat joint in the garage. And I don't remember if my daughter came out, maybe she was saying goodnight or, something, but she opens the garage door and she says, "Hey, Daddy." And I said, "Hey, baby girl." I said, "What's going on?" And she looked right at me and she said, "It smells like evil in here." And she turned around and closed the door. And I thought somebody just socked me right in my gut. And in that moment, I realized that I was following down the same path that my dad went down. I was carrying on that generational curse to my daughter, to our family. And I was really becoming everything that I had never wanted to be, everything that I swore that I was not going to do.
We'll get back to this conversation in a second, but right now, a word from our sponsors.
I didn't do this immediately, but not too long after that, it was time to make a decision. There were some other factors in my life too. I had a friend who got in that I did music with, who got in a really bad car accident and almost died around that time. He's in a coma for 52 days.
So you're doing a lot of reflection and stuff.
A ton of it, a ton of reflection, a lot of God shots, and just that could have been me. Why am I here? How did I get here? And so, I ended up reaching out for some help. And
what's the conversation like with your wife? Like when you tell her, like, I need help.
Oh, man, it was over like a large cup of vodka with a splash of orange juice.
Whatever gets you there.
Yeah, at a bar here in Vacaville. And, I just told her, I said, look, she knew something was up too, because my behavior and my, we were fighting a lot, we weren't getting along, and there's a lot of stress, a lot of financial stress going on, or broke, or lights are getting shut off. Like, it was a tough time. I just kind of came out and told her, I said, look, like, I have a problem, and I need some help, and I can't do this on my own. One thing I left out is, I had tried to stop, many times, in the years leading up to that, but it was never a serious attempt, and it was always an attempt to do it on my own. And so I'd put together like a week, or I'd just smoke weed for like a couple weeks, and then I'm not going to drink, and then I'd go back to it. And there was never any accountability there. There's never a full commitment. And so this time felt different. And thank God, my wife is one of the most supportive people I know. Like if you're about it, she's got your back, if you're one of her people, her family or friends. And she said, okay, well, I knew something was up, and what do we need to do? What's next? And I went to my buddy Seth too I think later that day. And I met up with him, and he had been sober for about a year. We've all known each other since we were kids. And so I kind of had Seth to help lead the way. I saw that he was doing it. And so I thought, man, if Seth can do it, I can do it. And that was inspiring to me. And so, yeah, I went, I got some help in Sebastopol, California. I went to a 30-day.
Okay, you went to a treatment?
Yeah, I went to a 30-day inpatient treatment. Man, I haven't looked back, man. It's been over 8 years. September 11th, 2013 is my sober date. And, man, there's been a lot of ups and downs, but I just, some days I can't believe the life that we have today, versus what it looked like, 8.5 years ago. It's pretty damn amazing. And it all started with the decision to cut out alcohol, because I always say alcohol is not my problem. That's the solution. I was listening to the latest podcast you did with Kevin E. And you guys talked about that a little bit, about how alcohol is not the problem. And I wish like to help fast track some dudes out there who might be listening to this or know somebody. We get so focused and centralized that I'm an alcoholic, or I'm not an alcoholic, or I just have a problem, or the alcohol is the issue. And yes, that's the face of the issue, no doubt. I have an issue with alcohol. I don't plan to ever drink it again because it messes with me. But the problem is me. The problem is my inability to feel and my inability to deal with life on life's terms, not Shane Raymer's terms. So the moment that I cut that out and I started to reshape the way I think, the way I act, the way that I live my life, over time things started to change, and I took advice, and man, it's been a great ride, man.
I mean,
I hope to continue to learn, man.
It comes off you, dude, when you talk, and you can hear it in your voice, and you can feel the passion. But I imagine it wasn't like that, September 11th of 2013. No. Right? I mean, I know for me, yeah. I mean, I showed up at rehab, kind of like, and I like what you said about a lot of times, if you're out there and you're listening, like, don't beat yourself up if you tell somebody you need help over a couple drinks, yeah. or again, like I was joking, but I was serious, right? Like whatever gets you there.
Yeah.
Whatever gets you there, as long as you get there. And when you got to treatment, did you notice? Because one thing I noted when we were talking about the straight edge guys is that camaraderie that they shared.
Yeah.
And that's what we get in a program. That's what we get. It's almost like a locker room again. And did you find that when you started? I know I did. When you started to come around.
I did, and that's that fellowship, that birth of community that I learned, early on, and just to your point, real quick, no, it absolutely did not look like that. I remember the first couple days in, I was in this detox room, right? It was probably day 2, and I'm just like, I'm thrown back, like, how in the shit did I get here? Like, I was supposed to do this, now I'm in rehab. Like, what the hell is going on? And I remember being in the bathroom, butt ass naked, about to take the shower's going. And this is, like I said, like day 2. And I just break down and I'm just bawling like a baby. and I'm just saying like, oh my God, like how my wife's back at home. We're in debt hella bad. Like my daughter, I miss the shit out of them. I feel like an asshole because I left them, but I know at the same time that like if I didn't make this decision, like our lives were just going to continue going on worse. And so I'm having like these kind of revelations and these moments. And when I look back on that now, the way I see it now is that God literally stripped me butt ass naked and put me in an uncomfortable position and totally had to strip me of everything in order to build back up, to something that I knew was like I mentioned earlier, that there was something better for my life, and not just for my life, but for my daughter, for my son now, for my wife, for our family, to break that curse. And so as I went on through the 30 days, and really that was kind of the easy part. It was the hard part going back home. But those 30 days, I found some great fellowship in there with some other dudes who were going through some of the same shit, who were from all different backgrounds and different races and different religions and different culture, man. And we all had this one thing in common. We struggled with alcohol and drugs, man. And it really there's a lot of group therapy, which was great. A lot of individual therapy, a lot of ways to deal. And then just for like a schedule too, like we had chores and try to get back on track on having some self-worth. And, it was a good experience. It was scary at first, but, it was definitely a pivotal moment, like in my life and in our family's life, to kind of make that decision.
But, my experience was similar to yours, again, in a sense where, that's why for me, I needed to go somewhere because when you have those moments, I mean, because I tried too, like, I would go to 12-step and I would get into it and then I would bounce. And then, I would go and I would, not drink, but smoke weed. You're always, messing around. And, I was never all in. And then, so I go to treatment and, when you have those moments like you shared, when you're basically stripped naked and totally vulnerable, for you literally, right? I mean, like, it's like those are times when if I didn't have four walls and structure all around me, I probably would have drank or taken something or whatever I could have, right? Just like just to check out. And I wasn't able to. And that's why recovery houses are good too, because again, like you mentioned, that camaraderie, to be in the mix with other dudes that share the common bond. Again, I take it back to sports, right? It's like you go into a locker room and there's like all different walks of life, all different, like you said, races, religions, but the common theme hopefully is winning or
exactly.
right, or getting better. And in recovery, we still get a chance to win. So you come out of rehab, and then what happens? Like, how do you start to pick up the pieces?
Yeah, so I was still at the same job at that time.
The mailroom?
I think I'd taken in the mailroom.
Now we're full time, right?
Yeah, I'm full time.
Which is probably a pretty good job. I'm thinking, like, with this big energy company.
It was a great job at the time. It changed the trajectory of everything for, my career, really, because, later I ended up starting a podcasting within a Fortune 500 company, which is still what I, work with today. And it started there. But at the time, I hated it. I was on a swing shift, which I hated because, like we talked in the very beginning, I'm a morning dude. I like being up early. And also, I had a lot of those same routines on that swing shift where I was driving, that I explained earlier, where I was driving in, I would stop. And so having to go back into that environment was really tough at the time. And, one of the biggest things that helped me is I had a lot of support from my wife, from my family. I had a lot of support from my buddy Seth, who I mentioned. And then I had a lot of support from meetings and just being involved in that community of men and women, but in particularly men. I really love a good men's meeting. Just trying to stay focused and dialed in, and just trying to stay on a schedule, and not go backwards, only go forwards. And that about 6 months, about 6 months. In that time, I was eventually I got out of the mailroom and I took a job out in Santa Rosa, which was like a 4-hour commute total daily, because it was about an hour and a half there and it was like 2.5 home because of traffic. And so I was working some long ass days.
Yeah.
And that's how I started listening to podcasts on my commute. So this is back in 2013, early 2014.
Okay.
And my buddy goes, "Hey, why don't you check this podcast out called The New Man by a guy named Trip Lanier?" And I said, "Okay." I didn't even know what the hell a podcast was at the time. I just heard, like, a friend of mine was a DJ. He had like a DJ podcast. That was the only thing I heard of it. So I started listening to this podcast, and I'm like, man, this is freaking great. And Trip's an awesome dude, man. He's been on Sober Guy a couple of times. I've been on his show.
What's his podcast called?
The New Man.
Okay.
The New Man podcast. Yeah. He's solid dude, man. You would love him.
Okay.
And so I'm listening to Trip, and I'm just starting to get motivated. I'm starting to feel this new desire and passion, and
yeah, it's the best feeling, dude.
It was so pure and just so genuine, and like I feel this desire that I want to share my story and I want to help other people. Like, I'm like, man, I kept this secret for so long. I love the traditions and I love anonymity. I respect it 100%. But outside of that, I also felt like I held on to the secret for so long that I wanted to share it. And I'm like, man, how am I going to help people if I got to like hide out again? I don't want to do that anymore. I want people to know. And so, long story short, I sat up in bed one night and I said, "Hey babe." She said, "What?" I said, "I'm going to start a podcast." She goes, "What? You're crazy." Like, what do you mean? This is like 6 months out of rehab. And I said, "Yeah." So I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I had a lot of music equipment from my time as a musician. I couldn't really play music anymore. I wasn't vibing on it like I used to. And I saw kind of where the podcast game was going. I looked up. I only saw Dr. Drew. That was really the only person I could find that was really talking about like recovery. I think there might have been a 12-step podcast, maybe a couple other ones. Paul Gilmartin, I think, was one of them, but there wasn't a lot.
Yeah.
And so I said, man, hey, maybe there's a need here. What I'll do is I'll just share my story. It'll help keep me sober. And then maybe I can invite some friends on and stuff and have them share, as they're working through their stuff. And so about a month and a half, I'm like trying to, figure out how I'm going to do this. And I think I eventually came up with the name and
That Sober Guy podcast.
Sober Guy podcast. Yeah. And, when I think I've underestimated that being one of the foundations that's really helped to keep me going, just because I love to do it so much. I love having conversations like this. Like, thank you so much again, for having
Thanks
me
for
on.
joining me. This is great.
And like, I really do love, the art of the conversation and the art of helping people and just sharing and, being able to do that. And it filled a big void for me, I think, the fact that I wasn't doing music anymore. I'm a creative dude. Like, I'm an artist. I love creating stuff. And so the podcast kind of helped birth this new way to be able to do that. And then, in addition to that, like I mentioned, I just had a ton of support from the people around me who were really rooting me on. And, I think it was tough for a lot of people too that were close to me, because I wasn't the dude that was like, and my buddy Seth is cool with me saying this, I'm sure, if he ever listens to this, like him and I were different. Like, I wasn't the blackout drunk. Seth more kind of went down that route. It affected him a little bit differently, the way he drank versus the way I drank. We drank together, but we were just different. A lot of people are like that. And like, a lot of people couldn't see the inner struggle that was going on inside of my own mind and heart. And it was excruciating for me. Like, inside, I was like my own worst enemy.
But then you get people being like, "Hey, you're okay, right? You can have a drink." Yeah. And it's
exactly.
Yeah, for me, I was like Seth. I was like Seth, where it was like everybody was like, Yo, dude, thank God.
Dude.
But then, like, a dude I've had on here, one of my, best friends forever, my buddy Murph, he was like you, where he was like, hey, like, people were coming up to him, like, are you sure? Are you sure? You're sure? And he was like, trust me, I was by myself getting wasted, doing drugs. Like, I just wasn't in front of everybody. And it was soul crushing. It sounds like you had a similar experience.
It was, and I think that goes back to that secrecy point I was talking about. It was like if everything was starting to be by myself. I want all the drugs, I want all the liquor, but I just want to hide out and do it by myself. And when I did do it in front of people, or when I was around other people, most of the time you wouldn't even know that I was on anything because I was pretty damn functional. I knew how to handle and control it to an extent where I wouldn't really get out of hand. I mean, I got in fights and stuff, for sure, like sometimes, but it wasn't like I wasn't, passing out in front of people. And I never
you held a job. You held a job.
Like crazy.
I held a job. That's
exactly.
A big thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, if you keep a job, then you must be like you're functional. You know what I mean? Like you don't need help.
Yep. That's that stigma, like the doorway of the homeless dude with the brown bag and he lost everything. And okay, he must be an alcoholic. It's like, well, yeah, maybe. And I feel for that dude, man. And right with that, there's thousands of other dudes who are doctors and construction workers and working, grocery. I mean, go down the list. So like all different types of things that are struggling with this. It doesn't discriminate, And so I think that's why I love like the work that you're doing, the work that I get to do, the work on having these conversations. And, we do kind of help chip away at that stigma and help people understand that like, there's just normal dudes out there who are going through this shit, and the more we open up and talk about it, the easier it's going to be to help some people understand that. Like, hey, you're not alone in this, man.
No, and the vulnerability
out there.
The vulnerability feels good, and
100%.
And that's like something. I was like you, like a runner. Like I didn't like. I thought if I was vulnerable, it was like a sign of failure. Like I thought if I told somebody I was hurting or there was something wrong with me, it was a real defect of character. Now today.
Weakness.
It was a weakness. But now today, not telling somebody about something, that is a defect of character. That is my ego. That, being a tough guy, it doesn't work out for me anymore. And there's certain instances today where I still, it's just like, well, this is how a man is supposed to handle this. And I end up in a jackpot.
Yep. That's it.
How did you build the podcast? Like, how did you build it? Because, and I'll tell you in a second how I came across you, but how did you build it?
So you mean like build it like
you
piece it out?
No, I mean like just like the reputation, the guests.
Oh, got you. Okay.
Like the repetition, like, to do something, you've been at this, for 8 years?
Yeah, about 8 years.
I mean, and that's something I could never do as a drunk. I couldn't sustain shit.
Oh, yeah.
So how
but
did
you dream about it though, right? But you would dream about shit, but we dream about it, but we never take action on it when we're drinking.
And I would lie about it too. Thing. I love to lie to people like shit I was doing or I was gonna do. And now I get to do the things that I used to lie about. I always say. So how'd you build it? Yeah.
So first, when you said how'd you build it, I'm one of the things a lot of people don't know, I'm kind of a gear nerd, like a tech nerd. I like gear and shit. So when you said, how'd you build it? My first thought was, well, I pieced together, because back then they didn't have like right now, I use a Rodecaster Pro, which is a cool little podcast console that I absolutely love, but they didn't have a Rodecaster Pro back then. So, I mean, I was like taking a mixer and like an old locker, I call it the locker room, like little Sony recorder, because I would see dudes in the locker rooms interviewing athletes using those back in the day, and I would wire it up to the mixer and then export it out through the so that it was that was one part of it, like trying to put together the actual hardware to produce the podcast, which was a fun part. But building it, man, there's been times a lot of them where I just wanted to quit and just stop doing it.
Yeah.
Because like it would just, I would set these expectations, I think, like where, I should be helping more people, or why this or why that. And what I've realized, man, is like, number one, consistency, just staying at whatever it is that we do. We got to stay consistent. We got to ride the lows with the highs. And, one of the biggest things people ask me, like, well, how long do you think you'll do it? Or, do you think you'll do it forever? It's like, as long as I'm having fun doing it, I will continue to do it. That's like my number one rule. But I think it's grown very organically over time, just because of the authentic nature of it. Like, I don't put out bullshit. Like, I want to have fun. I want to talk about, the things that are related to helping dudes cut alcohol out of their lives. But just like you and I right now, we've talked a little baseball. We've talked different things. We're talking life stuff. And I think that's what makes it interesting and fun. We can be sober, we can be drug free, we can be alcohol free, and we can still live life and have a great time doing it. And we can do all the things that we used to do without all that shit, those substances involved. We just have to reframe up how we live our lives and how we're doing things. And so
it's a broad question, but how do you tell guys to reframe their lives? Because you do a couple really cool things where you coach guys through, like 30 days of sobriety. How do you help guys? By the way, thatsoberguy.com is the website. Everything you need is right there. But how do you coach guys and help people?
Yeah. So, we do have a program. It's called Quit Drinking Dude, the ultimate men's guide to quit drinking alcohol and stay sober for 30 days or more. And that's really, it's 30 podcasts in 30 days, accompanied by some daily activities, some daily worksheets, and then a community of dudes in our local Sober Guy men's group to kind of help support along the way.
That's awesome.
But I created this process called prayer, PRAYR, kind of an acronym, and there's a couple components to it. It starts with personal responsibility and ownership. So we have to recognize there's a problem. We got to take ownership of it. We have to admit, and we got to let go. And I've really dove in head first to acceptance in my recovery. I mean, that's such a huge part of it, and even radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance. Yeah, my brother Kevin, he's a sober dude, and he introduced me to that a couple years ago, man. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such an awesome thing. And if anyone listening, you're going, what the hell is radical acceptance? Actually, it's the ability, and I have the definition of it. I like to keep it tight here. The ability to accept situations that are outside of your control without judging them, which in turn reduces the suffering that's caused by them. That's more of kind of a clinical definition of it. But in a nutshell, we got to accept shit the way it is. Like, as soon as, I should have said this sooner too. I have an amazing mentor and sponsor, buddy. Dude's taught me so much. We met through the podcast. He lives out in Georgia. We meet every week. It's just a crazy story on kind of how we came about, became friends and stuff. But he's taught me a lot about this shit too, about acceptance, about being like, where I am is right where I'm supposed to be. Like, I love, if I feel lost, anxiety, I'm feeling strange, social anxiety. The greatest tip, and actually Seth told me this one. He said, look at your feet, man, because God's got you right where you're supposed to be. And so it just helps reset me and just say, okay, I can accept and be in the moment. There's things I can't control. I have to accept that alcohol creates adversity in my life, and everything right now, whether it's low or whether it's high or good or bad, however I want to put it, it's just supposed to be like this right now. And I can do the next right thing to work my way out of this shit. But it's going to take time, patience.
That's all, because that's all we can do is just like, and there's a voice inside us as a guy who I know, comes around and he's a 12-step guy, and it's just like there's a voice inside you, especially if you've been sober for a little bit, that's telling you to do the right thing. And he calls that voice God, you know, and there's also the other shit, right? Maybe our first thought, that's whatever we want to do. But I know.
First thought wrong.
Yeah, first thought wrong, bro. But I know, I know like what the right thing is to do. I don't always do it. But I know, it's there. So this whole thing's about action. I was, Marshawn Lynch, remember about that action, boss? You know, like that. I always think, I think about that a lot. Like, and I've never actually told anybody that. It just came to mind because whenever I hear that,
great.
And there's a Macklemore song where he uses that quote, and it's just like, yeah, that's right. Like this program of action. Like I always think Marshawn Lynch would be great if he ever got sober. Yeah. But yeah, like it's about action. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, are you doing the next right thing? Or are you thinking about how you're getting motherfucked by this person that you don't want to accept right now? You know, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, that what mentality?
Yeah. That victim mentality. That's what that reminds me of. Like, are we taking action and doing the right thing, or are we complaining and playing the victim role? You know, I played the victim role for a long time. It didn't work out too well. You know, you reminded me too with the Marshawn Lynch. I'm just here so I don't get fined.
I'm just here so I don't get fined. that guy's a legend, man.
He is, man. He's a Oakland dude, right? I think Berkeley.
Yeah, he is.
The Bay Area too. Yeah.
So, but you said one thing you said that I love about the podcast is that it bridges the gap. And I love that in recovery, because there's a million different ways to do this thing. I have my way, you know what I mean? Like, which works for me, and whatever, it's day by day, but it works. And if I want to work it, it works incredibly well. But like other people have a different way of doing things. But like, how do you spread your message out to all people in a sense where you do a really good job of coming across not judgmental? You do a great job of bridging the gap. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I think it's like a genuine, want and I don't know, desire. I don't know what the hell the right word is necessarily, but like I just want to see people succeed. You know, if you truly want to cut alcohol out of your life, then start there. Like, I want to see you do that. Just like you said, Pete, like there's a million different ways to do it. I'm not going to sit and tell somebody like I did it like this and you need to do it the exact same way, because that person is not me. You know, now I can share what's worked for me and I can share what's worked for other people that I have, had relationships with and built friendships with, and that I've heard their stories and their experiences, of course. But my job, I feel like, is to lay out as many different options and ways and experiences and thought-provoking ways to get people to think for themselves. Because you can't, like, I'll give you an example, like right now, man. Like, and this is one of the things that that I've struggled with, and I've gotten better with it in that radical acceptance piece we talked about. Like, I get to help a lot of dudes, man. And I'm so grateful that that God's put me in this spot to be able to do that right now at this time of my life. There's one dude who I wish I could help, and I can't help him. And it's my father. My dad's still out there. He's still out on the street. He's still doing his thing. He's stuck in alcoholism. I've tried everything with him. He knows what I do, but I can't help him. And it's because he doesn't want the help. So I can't help somebody who doesn't want the help. And so me trying to tell somebody what to do, and don't get me wrong, like, 'cause this could be confused. I understand that sometimes we work with people, in different programs, and they need to be told exactly what to do. Like, when I first went to treatment, like, I needed to be told exactly what the fuck to do. So that's not what I'm saying. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Yeah.
But on a larger scale, it's like somebody who's not ready they might just have to go drink for a while longer until they figure it out on their own. And hopefully nothing bad happens in that process. But
well, and there's nothing we can do.
Day,
it's bigger than us.
It's out of our control. We can't control it. And so beating myself up over it and getting pissed off because they didn't do what I wanted them to do, or they didn't, it's not my path. It's not my worry. I can't carry that. I'm not designed to carry that because it's impossible. So I really like to take that approach. Like, let's have some fun. Let's share what worked, what didn't work. Let's have some great conversations. And then let's just provide a shitload of resources and options. So when people are ready, they can have, the pick that they want to do, whether it's a program, it's inpatient. We're partnered with a great company out of Nashville called Promises Behavioral Health. They have a great, working team there and facilities all over the place. So we have those connections. We have Sober Guy. I mentioned the 30-day course. We have tons of podcast content, one-on-one coaching, I'm part of an amazing mastermind group. I mean, there are all kinds of different programs too, from Celebrate Recovery, Refuge Recovery, all the major 12-step ones, of course, too. So, I mean, I would do a Monday meeting on Clubhouse. There's so many different options. And I think I just love to keep it open like that.
Yeah.
And then just connecting with great dudes like you and your platform, man, just to help spread the message. And people will figure it out when they're ready. And if they're not ready, then they're not ready,
Yeah.
And that's up to them. It was up to me to make that decision to tell my wife that day, like, I need some help,
I went to this rehab. No, go ahead.
Oh no, that was it. I mean, I was just going to say, like, we have to make a decision, and that's it.
Well, you get me excited when I really like talking to somebody. I keep jumping in.
I love it, man. I love it.
When I went to rehab, where I went this place called Karen, there was a coin, and it was a quote from the guy Dick Karen who started it, and it said, "If you want to drink, that's your business. But if you want to stop drinking, that's our business." And that's kind of like that's what you're describing, cool. Right? Yeah, that's like if you want to stop drinking, if you go to that sober guy, that's soberguy.com, right? Like that is a wealth of resources and knowledge and content. All right, before I let you go, I want to tell you how I found you. So I like get such a kick out of, like you, I was a little sports nerd, and and I grew up around the same time as you did, and I was like, I'd read about Vance Johnson. I was like, I gotta get his story. Like, is he really? Because I saw the picture of him like in a coma, and I was like, wait, Vance Johnson? Because all I remember was Vance Johnson. I told him he looked like a dude that could have been in New Edition. Like that was a guy that I knew. He was like, this is like right. And so I Google Vance Johnson sobriety, and your podcast comes up, and I was blown away. Wow. I was blown away, and then I just went down the rabbit hole. And your stuff is good. You're authentic. Your message and your energy, it's just contagious. And thanks, I can't tell you how much I appreciate guys like you being out there for guys like me, and for other dudes out there.
Oh man, dude, Pete, thanks, bro. You just made my day, man. It's Friday, and you just made my day with that, dude. I appreciate it, man. I really do love doing it. And Vance is a great dude. I should reconnect with him, man. He's got a great story.
He does. And the last time you talked to him was a little bit ago, and it's like, but it's still out there. So if anybody wants to listen to it, you can find it. Last thing, anything else you want to say? Anything else you want to leave people with? People that are struggling.
Yeah. So, first thing, real quick too, if you go to that soberguy.com, one of the main questions I get from dudes who maybe are just kind of scratching around, they're like, man, and maybe it's not like they don't have like the problem that like you or I had, Pete. Maybe it's just like they're kind of wondering, like, I want to take a break for a minute. I just want to see what that's like, So one of the questions I get is like, well, how do I go to social gatherings and not drink? So like I put together my like top 4 tips. It's just a little infographic. It's nothing crazy, but just 4 tips. It's on that soberguy.com. There's a little button there. You throw your email address in, hit the click button, and then it'll take you to the 4 tips. So check that out. Like if you're interested in anybody, And I'd love to leave people with one thing. You're not alone. You're not alone. I thought I was alone for, well, let's say two things. You're not alone, and there's always hope too, because I felt like I was alone, towards the end, and I felt hopeless, but there was this inkling, this little tiny bit in my gut that I could feel God tugging on. And I could feel there was something more. So if you're feeling that, if you know that voice, like Pete, you said it earlier, there's a little voice in there, and we know what's right. I don't know if you call it a conscience, whatever we call it. But you're not alone in this. And this thing called alcoholism, drugs, alcohol, man, it wants to keep us suppressed. Alcohol, actually, if you look up the term alcohol, it's AL-KUHL. It's an Arabic term. And alcohol means body-eating spirits. And it's been used as a tool to suppress consciousness. So when our consciousness is suppressed, our spirit can't thrive. It can't come alive. It can't find our full purpose in life because we're suppressed by alcohol. So it starts there. And that's what I mean when I say we feel alone. It makes us feel alone. It suppresses us. So I just want you to know, man, like anyone listening, if you're struggling, or maybe you got a son or a brother or a father or someone who's struggling out there, like, don't give up. There's a lot of help out there. There's a lot of good people who are willing to support and, pray, meditate, keep listening to good podcasts like Pete's and connecting. And, man, I just appreciate the opportunity to come on and just have a great conversation. This has been a lot of fun today, man. Thank you so much. And hey, we got to get you on Sober Guy too. So I don't know if I hang up and we're done, or if maybe you can just text me, or I'll text you and we'll set up a date to have you on.
Yeah, it's just Shane Raymer. You are that Sober Guy, and you are authentic, and I appreciate it. Yeah, we're going to wrap this up, and then I'm going to talk to you right now. All right? Appreciate you, dude.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.